Any college football playoff contender needs to have depth in its trenches, and sometimes you'll just sign a dude because he has a cool name. That has to be the reason why South Carolina is bringing in, say it with me, people, Boaz Stanley to Columbia in 2025. Let's go ahead and braid the move. Welcome on into SEC Unfiltered. He's Dave Shumate. I'm Cole Thompson, and today we talk about the former Trojan of Troy going now to Willie B. Real quickly, make sure that you like the video, hit the ring notification down below, and of course, subscribe to the channel because we talk college football every single day. Download the podcast version of the show wherever you get your podcast listening systems. Follow us on the socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, at SEC Unfiltered. Follow Dave at Mock 10 Sports, me at Mr. Cole Thompson, and check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends over at RHOBACK. It's a new year. It's a new you. You need a new wardrobe. What better place to look than RHOBACK? Get a nice pullover, a nice fleece, a nice hoodie, a nice pair of pants, a pair of shorts for the summertime. And when you go there, please use the promo code SECU at sign up for 20% off your first purchase. SECU, 20% off at RHOBACK.com. Tell them that the fine folks at SEC Unfiltered sent you. Dave, I'm just going to say his name like about 5 more times to get it out of my system. Boaz Stanley. Boaz Stanley, Boaz Stanley, Boaz Stanley, Boaz Stanley. Okay, cool. It's just so much fun to say. Like for that reason alone, it's a win for me. It's a good move. Guy comes on in from Troy, started 13 games last year, multi-positional. So he can play center, he can play right tackle, he can play right guard. Was signed as an All-American JUCO by the Trojans in 2023. If at worst, this is a depth piece, it's a really solid depth piece because if at least you know, guy's got position flexibility, and he's also got an opportunity to come on in and at least push whoever's in front of him for more first-team reps.
No, I agree with you, Baron. You also factor in the losses of Rashawn Lee, Torcelli Simpkins, and then Kamar Bell. I mean, this guy, you mentioned versatility. We've used that word a lot today on some of these transfer portal guys. Like you said, at worst case, this is depth. Yeah, from talking to people who've been around the kid, who've evaluated him down the line, yeah, there's some questions. But again, it would be interesting to see. I haven't talked to anyone at South Carolina, Lonnie Teasley, the offensive line coach, or anybody like who would know. Like, do they expect him to come and start? I mean, I think they'd be happy if he would. I mean, that's the plan. You always want to take a kid to be a good player and be a contributor for you. But I think they'd be fine if he was your 6th, 7th guy off the bench. As well. I mean, again, you lose 3 starters. We all complain about offensive line play. I mean, I think it's an issue across the sport, even at the high school level at this point. It is what it is. I mean, they're hard to find. I mean, Cole, you cover the Houston Texans. NFL teams struggle to find offensive line. There's guys that are sitting in NFL camps that have been on a team when I worked in college that you're like, that guy hung around in the NFL for 10 years. Like, how? We didn't even think he was that good. Well, guys, like big bodies who move, like dancing bears, as we used to call them. No pun, but Cole with the Bear Thompson. But dancing bears at that size are hard to find. It's just hard to find offensive linemen. So you're going to go take some run, even if you aren't overly fired up about it, or if you don't think they're complete products, because inevitably you're going to have injuries on the offensive line. Depth will be key. We even see it with playoff contenders. Georgia, Texas have had Ohio State. Notre Dame lost a left tackle going into the season. We see it. You need depth pieces. That's where you're win. It's not your top 22. It's your top 45, 50 on your roster. And I think your boy Boaz Stanley will be trying to help the Gamecocks replicate the 9-win season this year.
Can we just say it one more time? Boaz Stanley. Like, honestly, I want him to start now simply so every single week I can just start off a show by saying Boaz Stanley.
It sounds like a guy from Bogart, Georgia, Bear.
Dude is going to come on in and at least provide exceptional value. I think the position flexibility is huge for South Carolina. I think it's huge for Mike Shula to be able to scheme up his offense however he sees fit. Here's the one thing I will say about him that really does stand out. Last year, he played over 767 snaps, both at center and right tackle. Dave, he was the only player in the Sun Belt as a starter for 12 games that was not penalized. So he plays a clean version of football. You're not going to get a lot of holds. You're not going to get a lot of false starts. You're not going to get a lot of offside call. You're not going to get all these things that usually hurt a team, especially on the offensive line. That, I think, is valuable. I think having somebody that kind of understands, and sometimes it's better to be late to the party than showing up really early because if all the fun is going on and you just get to kind of gel on in. Maybe that's Boaz Stanley. I mean, I'm going to say his name like that for probably the rest of the show. Again, you get protection for Lenore Sellers. That's key number 1. You're adding in depth to your offensive line. That's key number 2. Number 3, you're bringing in a dude that if you need to come in and maybe just be that 7th offensive lineman or that 6th, like let's just say that you're going into the red zone and you're at the 2-yard line and you need to add in that extra lineman. He's the position eligible dude. Okay, we can do that. And if you want to slot him in at right guard and move the right tackle out to being the actual open guy and the right guard being the right tackle, you can do that too. And then you just pile driving it up the middle. So there's just so much that I think in the terms of what he can be for a depth purpose and even a fringe starter, protecting a quarterback like the Norris Sellers, getting the run game going, and just adding in that value to a guy for Mike Shula to be able to work with. It's a win on paper. And then you throw in his name, Boaz Stanley, and it's just like, okay, well, now I got to probably overrate him, and then I'm going to come back and eat crow at the end of the year.
No doubt. You got to like the name, but you're right. The versatility there on the offensive line from a depth standpoint, I think, is what would get me. I don't know if the word's fired up, but it would get me like it is what it is. This is a solid depth piece take. I wouldn't think it anything past that if I was a South Carolina fan.
Let's go ahead and grade the move, Dave, as we always do. Elite, all league, winnable plus, winnable minus. I think you and I both have the right answer to this one. I'm just going to come out and say it. I'm not overrating Boaz Stanley because his name is really fun to say.
All league. I got you, Bear.
I will let you go ahead and break this down really quickly on what the grading scale is. And what do you think? I mean, he's definitely not a POI because he's playing in the SEC. He's worked his way on up. I mean, he was at the Georgia Military Institute, All-American, goes to Troy, has a solid season, now playing in the SEC. This is something that you and I have talked about. I'll get to that in a moment, but let's go ahead and grade the move.
Yeah, I kind of like the money ball a little bit. Again, I mean, you talked about it, Bear. Again, not getting long-winded, but some of these mid-tier SEC.
That's what I was going to talk about. So there we go. Okay.
Yeah, we'll come back to it. Elite all league South Carolina fans. We've done a couple of these on your guys, so you're familiar. Me and Cole, most people aren't giving out elite all leagues. These are the dudes that your wife could tell you are really good football players, or for the ladies listening to us, your non-ball knowing husband could tell you is a good football player. But most of your roster here, if you're going to have a championship contending roster, 50-70% need to be hitting at that winnable plus level. That is a championship contending roster. Again, Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning use this. It's simplified from the Nick Saban, Bill Belichick critical factors. That's just a lot of numbers crunching. And today, things go by too fast. We just need terminology. Then winnable minus. Don't get discouraged by the minus. It's you can win with, not because. It's winnable plus is you're going to win because. And again, I think the offensive line's full of winnable minuses across the board. And that's why I'm going to give our guy Boaz Stanley a winnable minus. I think for Boaz to be successful, I mean, he's going to need a good offensive game plan. He's going to need to develop on a Lonnie Teasley. He's going to need some help from his other guys on the interior to help him, hey, get the call in right. Again, I remember when I was at Alabama, Barrett Jones would have to tell DJ Fluker what to do all the time. So it was like at that time, DJ Fluker was a winnable minus guy. And I'm not comparing, for people listening, DJ Fluker, who was a genetic freak, to our guy Boaz Stanley. Just using an example from the terminology here. So Bear, I'm going to go winnable minus. I think you can win with this offensive line unit. And I think South Carolina was pretty healthy for the first time, I feel like, since the Roosevelt administration on the offensive line. So that helped them get to the 9-win season. You need help. I think that'll be key. Is he a depth piece? We don't know. But I think a winnable minus is a very suitable grade for our guy Boaz.
It's a winnable minus. I'm going to say it one more time. That way I don't go ahead and ruin it. Boaz Stanley. Okay, cool. For me, again, number one, offensive line depth. You need it. I mean, you look at the teams that are currently in the college football playoff semifinals, Texas's offensive line depth. The reason why Notre Dame has been able to be so good is because they had a quality left tackle to back up Charles Saginaw. What you've seen from Ohio State and how they've responded, what you've seen from Penn State this year, you need an offensive line. You need depth if you want to be successful. Number two, it's a guy that can come on in and at least compete. You look at the roster right now. Where do you feel good about your offense? I mean, what do you feel good about your center position? Is it going to be Ryan Brubaker? Is it going to be somebody else that you bring on in? How do you feel about Casey Henry now being your starting right tackle? How do you feel about maybe a guy like Marquis Anderson coming on in to be your starting left guard? It's going to push the position. It's going to add that type of value in terms of just making sure that you have everyone playing up to a certain standard, because Boaz can come on in and at least add some value if you need him to start for, let's just say, a game or two. And the third thing is it betters your odds of landing the top 5 offensive linemen. Here's the rule that I always have, Dave, when it comes to building an offensive line. If I have a guy that can play center but can also shift out to left guard, and there's a better option for me at center than currently who I have as my starting left guard, I'm going to do that. I want the 5 best dudes out there.
Get the best 5.
I don't care if they play out of position and they got to learn on the fly. I want the 5 best dudes out there, because that's going to make my quarterback better. That's going to make my offensive passing attack better. That's going to make my run game better. That's going to open up the playbook. That's going to give us more opportunities to score. So when Boaz Stanley comes in here and he is better than what we see at left guard, and you have a guy that can play center, okay, stripe him in at left guard, call it a day. If he's not good enough, okay, well, at least you're pushing into where he comes on in. And you and I talked about this. Places like Arkansas and South Carolina and Kentucky, and I'll even throw Missouri in there, They need to start looking a lot more when they go into the portal and not overspending, but definitely considering these all league Sunbelt players, because the Sunbelt really has done a good job over the last few years producing talent left and right that can be elevated, that can be substantially that much more confident, that can be that much more consistent. And I feel like that if you continue to do the development process, I'm not saying that it's a minor league for the SEC, but you know the location. A lot of times you're usually playing against 1 or 2 of these squads per year. You kind of get a good feel about who stands out and who doesn't. That's what South Carolina should be looking at. I think it's a really good move on paper. If nothing else, what it does is it just gives you more opportunities to be right with the starting 5.
Yeah, you're right. And I think from the Sun Belt level, me and you talked about this. I've talked about it with personnel people in this league. Schools like Arkansas, South Carolina, just the mid-tier kind of like, hey, you need to go play a little bit money ball, go to the Sun Belt League, the Group of 5 team, like that geographical region where it's not too far from them, and go kind of pick the best players out of that. Again, you're probably not going to want to go overspend. You're going to have to go spend a little more than hypothetically like Georgia would on a kid because, again, you don't have that G on your logo. So you need to be confident in your evaluations, which I'm sure Shane Beamer and them have. So, I mean, it's not a bad strategy, but a lot of people are zigging. You can be zagging. And I think some people have already taken this approach to some extent. So we'll see. Again, I think this is where when you're in that mid-tier of the SEC consistently year in, year out, you need – and again, South Carolina overachieved that this year. They won a mid-tier SEC team this year. But, like, traditionally, you have to out-evaluate and be different because, again, you don't have the privilege or just being lucky of having that logo right next to you that helps damn near anybody recruit if you got that A and G on your chest.
Well, they still have B and not E. So instead of excellent, it's above average. We'll go with that, whatever it is. It's brilliant. Brilliant for the SEC. Let us know in the comment section down below. What do you think of Boaz Stanley coming to Willie B in 2025? Like, review, hit subscribe. Make sure that you're following us on all the social media channels. TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at SEC Unfiltered. Follow me at follow Dave at Mock 10 Sports. Me at Miss Cole Thompson. And check out all of our great work found at SECUnfiltered.com. For today's Shumate, I'm Cole Thompson. War Chickens, you got yourself some offensive line depth for Lenore Sellers. That's a win in itself. Peace.